So you're thinking about repainting your motorcycle and you don't feel like spending thousands upon thousands of dollars to get a professional to do it. And the question that you're asking yourself is, can I just do it at home? Those are all the questions that I was asking myself when I thought about painting my bike. Today, I'll be answering, can you paint your motorcycle at home yourself? So let me go ahead and put the cart before the horse a little bit. Yes, you can paint your motorcycle yourself at home and it'll look good as long as you take your time and you do a little bit of study on how to do it. So step one, if you're gonna repaint your motorcycle, now I'm not talking about, the first time painting some brand new parts that you ordered, although this process could also be relevant to that as well. What I'm talking about today is how do you repaint your motorcycle. So step one is gonna be, you have to take the shine off of the paint. You have to take that clear coat off, or at least scuff it enough to get a good surface for the new paint to bond. So what that's gonna look like is you're gonna need a DA, which is a dual action buffer. I'd recommend a DA over an orbital. Orbital buffers spin just in a circle and they're a lot more likely to dig deeper if you don't know what you're doing. So if you're rather inexperienced, a DA is good. I know you can get one from Harbor Freight for cheap. So what we did when repainting my motorcycle is we used a DA. We wet sanded it with that DA, went over all the parts we wanted to repaint until we had really taken all of the shine off and got the paint to look flat. So there wasn't much shine to begin with because my paint was matte, which made it a little bit more challenging for my bike in particular, but really it really grayed out my denim paint. And the way that we could really tell that it was ready to paint was there was no shine at all. You could feel it was a little bit rougher to the touch, and we really made sure that it was consistent on every single part. And some of it had to be done by hand as well, so when you don't want to spend too much time with a DA on any of the edges, so you might want to use some sandpaper by hand to get that done. And you're going to need a little bit tougher grit, so you might be looking at maybe like 500 grit or something like that, a little bit rougher than you're going to be using later on in the process. But to start, you're going to want to use that DA and take that clear coat off, or at least scuff it up to the point that the new paint is going to adhere. That's step one. When you get done with the DA, then it's going to be time to take a scuff pad of a similar grit by hand and just get all the imperfections out using that scuff pad. And that's basically like a little sponge that has enough grit to it that it can kind of finish the job. So step two is going to be taping. You're going to need to go ahead and tape off anything that you don't want paint on it. Anything, any surface that you don't want paint on, go ahead and tape it off with painter's tape. Whenever you go to buy your paint to repaint your motorcycle, I recommend going to an automotive paint expert, a place that sells paint, for instance PPG or DuPont. I would not get my paint from Advance Auto or some over the counter place like that. That's not where the professionals go. They don't know much about the process of painting typically, so they can't be of much help. So I'd go to a place like that and speak to the person that you're gonna buy your paint and clear coat from, and they're gonna give you the information on how to properly mix your paint and how many layers of clear coat they would recommend, as well as how much time you wanna wait between each layer of clear coat. So basically, once you have everything taped off and you get it set up, the third step is actually going to be spraying. And I mean, you can watch plenty of tutorials on YouTube about how to spray paint. It's a pretty methodical process, but the next step would be laying down your first layer of paint. Depending on the color and how thick you laid on the first time, a lot of people do 2 layers of paint. You definitely need to allow time to dry between those two. I know that initially for my paint job, we started out with 1 layer of black and then moved on to the black cherry paint that we ended up using to finish it. So definitely multiple layers of paint can help get a more consistent color throughout. So once you get done with those layers of your paint, then you move on to your clear coat. Now clear can take a lot longer to dry sometimes, especially the clear coat that we put on my bike, which has a lot of gloss to it. It sprays on very heavy. It ran like crazy, so there was all sorts of what's called runs, which is basically like when the clear coat drips down, and you can clearly see that it's an imperfection. So basically that next step would be painting and then clear coating the bike. Now the thing is, you need to have a place to do this, and a lot of painters, especially the professionals, they're gonna paint somewhere in a dust-free environment. Now the average person like you and me, we don't have a place like that. I tried to use my basement that I'm sitting in right now to paint initially. That's where we started, but eventually we just decided it was too much of a pain and we moved outside on a pretty clear day. I did put up a little covering out there, almost like one that you'd camp with, a pop-up, and we painted underneath that, and we had all sorts of crud get into the clear coat. So you know, I'll explain more about that on the next step, but you know, definitely spraying. I'll give you an example of it here in a second. I'll drop the video of my guy Chad painting it. So once you get the bike painted and you get the clear coat on, the next step is just going to be remediate. You are going to be sanding your life away. You're going to be wet sanding and wet sanding and wet sanding, because if you're painting at home, you're going to get all sorts of little bugs, specks of dust, all sorts of things in your paint job. And what you have to do to correct that is you're going to have to come back behind it and sand it out, sand it away. Once you sand out all those imperfections, then it's going to be time to do the finishing sanding. So basically what you want to get from any automotive parts store, you can get one of those finishing sanding kits. Typically it's got like the 1000, 1500, 2000, 2500. It gives you a little bit of all of them, and typically you want a sanding block for that, where you can just put the sandpaper on the block and then kind of scrub it away. So you're going to start with 1000 and work your way up to the 2500. Don't go too heavy with the 1000, you might ruin your clear or have to do a lot of more work later on. But basically you're going to go through and sand your way all the way up to that 2500. By the time you get to that 2500, it should still be cloudy. There's definitely a lot more to go. It's not going to look like a finished product at that point. You're going to think that something's wrong because it looked all beautiful when you sprayed it, and it's going to be all shiny and good looking, but there's going to be imperfections. And as you sand your way up to that 2500, it's going to get closer and closer to the way it looked before, but the imperfections should be gone. So the final step is going to be using that same DA buffer / polisher to cut and buff the paint, and this is what's really going to make it shine. So what you're going to need is some cutting compound. So you're going to take some cutting compound, and you're going to take your DA, and you're going to go all over everything that you did, and you're going to cut it and buff it. So when you cut and buff it with your DA, you're going to use some cutting compound, and I know 3M makes a good one. That's the one that we use, but you're basically going to use the DA to cut it first, which is going to look like it's scratching it up a little bit, but then you're going to come back and polish it. And then when you get done, you can use a lot finer foam pad on your DA polisher to really give it that final shine. At the end, when we first painted the bike, we used, let me see, I think it was a glaze that we put on there, I think it was a number 9 glaze if I'm not mistaken, and I just did that by hand just to give it that final shine that I felt like it needed. But at the end of the day, you know, you're gonna see here in a second, I'm about to drop the before and after right here, right now, so you can see what happened. And full disclosure, I mean, this bike was painted almost a year ago, so I'm talking about something we did a long time ago. I'm trying to jog my memory to remember everything that we did, but you know, I just want to say big shout out to my neighbor Chad for really coming through and helping me paint this bike. Me and him spent hours and hours and hours together, and this was you know, at least a 20 beer job stretched out over many days, a couple weekends, and we got it knocked out. But I think even a year later, I think it still looks great. Definitely some imperfections, and some of that's my fault after the fact. I wish I would have taken this video sooner, but hey, I think it still held up amazing. And I do think, you know, that if you do this at home yourself, I think you can make it look this good, from just like what you're about to see. I think you can make it look this good if you just take your time and keep scrubbing away, because really it is all about sanding, the fine sanding, using those 1000, 1500, 2000, 2500. It's about going to town with those and getting it right, wet sanding using those sandpapers. So I mean, that's it. If you take your time and you can fix it, and you can see it happening too. It's not, it is a rather complicated process, but really you'll see what you're doing, and you don't have to be too afraid with some of those finer sandpapers. You can definitely do no harm, especially once you get up to about the 2500. As long as you don't spend too much time on the edges. You know, they definitely take a lot less effort to do the edges because they collect a lot less paint typically. So you'll see some of the imperfections on it, but overall I just want to show y'all what's possible even doing it at home and getting a bunch of dust and stuff stuck in the paint. I remember I was terrified, like, oh my god, this is gonna look horrible, and Chad kept reassuring me, hey man, it's gonna be all right, like we can get this out, we can still make it look okay. This is my 2014 Street Glide. It had black denim paint on it, and now we put this black cherry on it. The actual name of this paint, according to the bottle when we bought it, is a PPG paint. It's called Edible Berries. So I'm gonna go ahead and rock that before and after. This is the Average Biker signing out. Y'all take it easy.